Hello, you are about to see a presentation that was recorded at a meeting of the Wem Whitchurch Deanery Synod on Thursday the 18th of March. If you've found this video, you're probably already somewhat aware that the Diocese of Lichfield has asked our deanery to play its part in the process known as Shaping for Mission. But don't worry if you don't know much more than that. This presentation should help to fill in a lot of the blanks for you. We hope that you find it informative and helpful. For those of you who are still a little bit fuzzy around the edges on what Shaping for Mission is about, it is a process across the entirety of Lichfield Diocese to strengthen our life of discipleship, vocation and evangelism, whilst at the same time facing a significant reduction in financial income. And we are working together as a people of hope to make our mission sustainable in helping to fulfill our diocesan vision, which begs the question, what is our diocesan vision? There we go. What is our diocesan vision? As we follow Christ in the footsteps of St. Chad, we pray that the 2 million people in our diocese encounter a church that is confident in the gospel, knows and loves its communities, and is excited to find God already at work in the world. We pray for a church that reflects the richness and variety of those communities. We pray for a church that partners with others in seeking the common good, working for justice as a people of hope. That is our diocesan vision. It's in the form of a prayer, and it is plastered across so much of the stuff that the diocese puts out, but it is there, and it's, you know, there's a lot of positive stuff in that vision. The question then is, how do we make that vision work on the ground? So that's what the diocesan vision is, but we're now also in this process called Shaping for Mission. You'll see that I've shortened it to SFM on the screen. That's just because otherwise I have to type Shaping for Mission every single time. The diocesan aims are threefold. The first is to enable parishes, schools, chaplaincies and fresh expressions to be effective at developing those three streams of mission that the diocese likes to talk about: discipleship, so how we follow Christ; encouraging vocation, so how do we encourage people to think about where God is calling them to be and who God is calling them to be; and then inspiring evangelism, so how do we share the good news with other people. The second aim is to reshape the diocese via the deanery structure to deliver this mission and ministry in an effective, affordable and sustainable way. So it's taking something that was very much more about parishes maybe, and starting to think about how we as a deanery can work together. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. And then the third part of it is to develop the strategic deployment, this is the diocese's own words, of lay and ordained ministers, and to reduce the number of paid ministry posts over the next 3 years. Now, when they said next 3 years, we've already had the first year. So we're actually over the next 2 years, and in the process saving £1.75 million, which equates to 30 full-time equivalent clergy posts, but it isn't necessarily just clergy. The diocese does expect to potentially be losing posts from within the central diocesan team as well. So that's a bit of a summary of what the diocese thinks Shaping for Mission is. What it means, as I was saying, is it's a big shift for deaneries, because traditionally deaneries have provided some governance for the diocese, and they've provided a support network for those in ministry. So thinking particularly about deanery chapter. So the clergy meet together as a deanery chapter. In this deanery, that works out as very roughly once a month. And we support one another, and there is a bit more of a support network around that as well. But now what the diocese is asking us to do is both of those things, and for the deanery to be involved in discerning the mission of the church in our deanery. So whereas previously we've had parish mission action plans, we're effectively starting to think about what our deanery mission action plan might be. That's one way of thinking about it. That's the plan, and what we have to think about is what are the phases of the Shaping for Mission process. And we are currently in phase 1, or we're coming to the end of phase 1, as you'll see in a minute, which is called the Deanery Review. and the Shaping for Mission teams get put together, and we carry out a review of our deanery. So as I just said, we are here. We are here at the end of that process. We've done our deanery review. We're moving into, very quickly, phase 2, which is vision setting. So that is where the Shaping for Mission team will work with the wider deanery, that's you, with clergy, with anyone else who's interested, and we're asking those questions about who and what God is calling us to be and what our priorities for mission are. And we'll come to that at the end of the presentation. And then the third phase will be translating that vision into reality. So that's where the central diocesan team, particularly the bishop's staff, will work with those visions that our deaneries have produced, and they will work with each individual deanery to get that vision in process, to sort of think about the strategy for how to make that vision work. But that also then involves the decisions about resourcing and staffing. As I said, we're already here at the end of phase 1. Phase 2 starts now and runs till the summer. And then phase 3 runs from summer 2021 onwards. So this is a tight turnaround on some big decision making. Next question is, who's in the team? Very often we put the clergy first, so I decided not to put the clergy first on this occasion. We've got some great lay involvement in our Shaping for Mission team in this deanery, and I don't just say that because my wife is one of those members. I say that because we have some great team members. As I've hastened to add, in many cases, I did not recommend my own wife for the Shaping for Mission team. I would have, but that came from a central diocesan recommendation. So we're very grateful for that because it saves me being embarrassed. We've also got other members of our team. We've got Paul and Sam. For those of you who don't know Sam, Sam's our new curate in Whitchurch area. And obviously you all know Adam, you know me. Simon Foster is appointed facilitator by the diocese. He's been really helpful in giving us sort of an outside view without being too invested in it in some respects. And he's given us lots of encouragement and support. And we've also got the Archdeacon, who has a bit of a watching brief, and also Bishop Sarah, and Adam and I get the opportunity to update her on where we're at once a month. So that was the team. The next question is what we've been up to as a team. So the first thing was the diocese sent us an absolute shed load of data about our deanery, and they said, is it right? And we checked it and we said, yeah, most of it's right. There's a few things we need to correct, but also there's a lot of extra information that we need to add in. So we've ended up telling the diocese that there's a lot more going on than they think there is, which is a really good thing to be able to say. And we've been compiling our answers for what they produced, which is this deanery review document. And part of that has come through liaising with the clergy of our deanery. So we've had our deanery chapter meetings and we've asked them, what do they think? What input do they think needs to be mentioned? But it's also come through the questionnaires that, as Adam mentioned earlier, that so many of you have filled in for us. And we're very grateful to that. And Paul spent a huge amount of time and effort collating all those results for us so that we could make sense of it. And the other thing that we've done is to speak to our local schools, and you'll see why we've spoken to our local schools in a minute. We asked them what they value, what they would like more of, and it was really nice. They celebrated a lot of positive things, but they also said, we want more of this and that and the other. So those are the kind of things we've been doing in order to put together this review of our deanery, which then begs the question, what have we found? What is the stuff that we found out about our deanery? And when you're listening to everything else that I tell you now, I'd love you to bear in mind that we are working towards the following question. What do we think the vocation of this deanery might be? Now, I've translated that into some slightly different words. What is God prompting our deanery towards? So if you don't like the word vocation, then ignore the word vocation and use the word prompting instead. What is God prompting our deanery towards? And just keep that in the back of your mind all the way through the next bit of this presentation when I tell you what it is that we found. So the first bit, lots of bits of information, of data and all sorts. We've got a population of over 31,000 people. We have 21 church buildings, and all but one of them are listed buildings. We have a usual Sunday attendance of 475, which correlates to 451 adults and just 24 people under the age of 16. That is really significant, and we will come back to that a little bit later in the presentation. We've got 8 clergy who are licensed, which includes full-time, part-time, curates, plus those with permission to officiate. We've also got 5 readers, just 5 readers across our whole deanery, and we've got lots and lots of other formal roles and informal roles. What else have we found? Worship. We've got Sunday worship going on, and we've got midweek worship going on. We've got churches that are involved in eco-church, so they're thinking about our environmental impact. We've got dementia-friendly church in places. We have got Sunday school but not much. We are doing lots and lots of collective worship in schools. And we have fresh expressions. We've got things like Messy Church. We've got Praise at 3, which is a bit like Messy Church, but not quite. And we've got Food and Fellowship. And all of those are fresh expressions, different ways of doing church from the traditional stuff that we might know. And what's really interesting about worship is that our online worship has really grown in the last 12 months. No surprises there, but we've done lots and lots of online stuff in the last 12 months. What else have we found about community action? We've got food banks in our deanery. We've got community cafes and shared lunches going on. We've got lots of pastoral provision in all sorts of different forms. There are groups that offer money advice and debt advice and financial support. We've got mental health support. We've got people going into care homes and providing chaplaincy of lots of different forms. So there's chaplaincy in schools, there's chaplaincy in the hospitals, and things like that. And we've even got a school uniform bank going on. What's unique or unusual about our deanery, though? Well, the most interesting thing, we've got 12 Church of England primary schools. That's a huge number of primary schools for a deanery. It's a really big number. We might be the deanery with the most Church of England primary schools. We're not sure, but we might be. And then the other thing about it is we've got this geography. The geography of our deanery is that it's long and thin, but it drags us in different directions. I took the opportunity to draw on the map of the deanery all the A roads. And if you look, they all point off either down towards Shrewsbury, off towards Stafford, or out towards Wrexham and Chester. And then apart from that, there's one that just goes straight up the middle. And so the directional pull of our deanery is actually that many of our members of our deanery look outside our deanery for lots of things. And we are based on our A roads, we're a very long, thin deanery. And we've got 2 towns, which again, you can see that on the map, that they're there, those Wem and Whitchurch, but then we've got masses and masses of rural. Masses of rural. And so that means that we've sort of got 2 different styles of ministry already going on. We've got RAF Shawbury, very close to my heart. We've got Whitchurch Hospital, and we've got the deanery secondary schools. Not only have we got 2 secondary schools in our deanery, but we have a deanery schools chaplain, and that is unique to our diocese. No other deanery in our diocese has this secondary schools chaplain. So when Adam was talking earlier about the fact that we're going to levy £15 for the year, that is really good value for money for a deanery schools chaplain. That's something that's already working, that we decided in the past few years, certainly in the last 2.5 years since I arrived, that this was something that we felt was important for our deanery to do. So that's what's unique about us, perhaps. So when we asked you lots of questions, or when we did our own research, what were the things that kept coming up again and again and again? And the first one of those was youth. There was a sense of grief at the lack of young people in our deanery churches, within our congregations, and that we were linking up with. And also linked with that, there was a sense of frustration that people perhaps have been doing roles within their churches that they may have hoped to have passed on years ago to their next generation down, or even the generation below them. But they haven't been able to because there's been nobody there to take it on. And when we say youth, actually, we're probably talking about people under the age of 40, maybe even 50, maybe even 60. And we have to be honest about that. But youth was one of the words. Schools came up again and again and again. I've already said we've got these 2 secondary schools with our deanery schools chaplain, but we've got these 12 Church of England primary schools, which is fascinating. What else? You'll have to excuse me using my own benefice logo, but it was the one that was easiest at hand. A lot of you, when you filled in your questionnaires, talked about parish. You appreciate the parish system, you appreciate the benefice system. So you like the fact that you work together well within your parishes and within your benefices. There is an appreciation of the local church. And that's actually something that is mentioned very strongly within national church research. The Church of England's own research says that what people appreciate most about the Church of England is its localness. What else came up? Mention of the vicar or the rector. You talked about us a lot, don't know why, but there you go, you did. So that's really fascinating. Something else that came up was sermons. Yes, we're as surprised as you are. You liked talking about our sermons, but thank you for doing so. We hope that you'll find that a continuing benefit. And then the other thing that came up particularly is, of course, our old friend, or if you like, enemy, COVID-19. Yeah, we have to be honest, COVID-19 has changed a lot of things. If we hadn't had COVID this year, we wouldn't have had so much uptake of online services, for example. So that's a really good example of where COVID has spurred us in a positive direction, perhaps, that we've been able to do more things. But at the same time, there's a recognition that COVID has stopped us in our tracks in a lot of things as well. So that came up as well. All right, so those are things that came up. What we then thought about, what we've thought about as a Shaping for Mission team is what are our strengths? And this is what we came up with based on the things that you told us and the deanery review that we've done. Chaplaincy. We have schools chaplaincy and we have hospital chaplaincy. We're particularly proud. You can see that the chaplain comes up again on the third one. The deanery secondary schools chaplain comes up in a separate place as well. But chaplaincy is something that we're actually not bad at all. And we're proud of our involvement with the wider parish. We don't just do things in church, but there are things that we do outside the church. And things like the food banks and things like that, we were saying we don't just stay as little groups on our own, but we are reaching out. Not as much as we could perhaps, but we are doing it. Our clergy cooperation, the clergy of our chapter actually genuinely like each other in the main, I think, and we get on with one another. But also we have a lot of support from our retired clergy. We're very grateful to our retired clergy with permission to officiate. They help us out in all sorts of ways. And for some of us who've been shielding in the last 12 months, actually, some of them have taken huge amounts of funerals for us and things like that. So we're incredibly grateful for them. Our strengths, our growing use of the daily offices through online services, for example. Zoom is part of that, but actually the growing use of the daily offices is a strength by itself, whether it's Zoom or not. The fact that people don't just think church is about Sunday, and particularly during lockdown, we've stepped up on that. We've actually realized that we can make church something that is part of our daily lives rather than just get our Sunday fix, if you like. And we're also celebrating our dementia-friendly work, not just our dementia-friendly work in church, but where we go out into care homes and hospitals too. So those are the things that we're really good at, or that we're quite good at, or that we're slightly good at. So the question then follows on, what are we not so good at? Where are we struggling? One of those things is communication across the deanery. I've already showed you the map of our geography. It's really important that we recognise that makes it difficult for us to meet and to share resources in some ways, and to gather and do things together. But actually our communication, there's always room for improvement in communication. I said this earlier, our ability to reach those under the age of 40, and as I said, maybe 50 or 60. There are churches where the youngest people are in their 70s, and we need to recognise that. Perhaps our prayer life is a weakness, or our confidence in prayer, the fact that things aren't necessarily always grounded in prayer, or that we just don't know how to do it or to do it effectively. So there's lots of questions about that. We also recognise that it used to be that churches had their own preschool groups in so many places, and over the years, for all sorts of reasons, that hasn't happened. That stopped happening, and mainly because those generations have grown up, and there comes a point where you're no longer sort of looking after your own children, but you're looking after somebody else's children, and your children have flown the nest. So we've stopped doing that, and when it has been taken on by secular groups elsewhere, we haven't necessarily stepped in and said, can we be a part of this in some way? And we're also aware that we are struggling to reach the most rural parts of our parishes. When we've got villages and we've got towns, we're doing okay. But when we've got tiny little hamlets that are attached to those villages in some way, are we reaching them effectively? That's a really big question that we've got. So we think that's an issue that we might be struggling with. Let's go back to the celebration. Where's good collaboration and partnership happening within the deanery? So I've already mentioned between the clergy. We do support one another and help one another. I have also mentioned within benefices between churches. So where we do have benefices, multi-church benefices, we are working together, not always brilliantly, but we are working better than we might do. There's good collaboration between churches and schools. The schools wanted to celebrate what we already did with them. There's also good collaboration in the fact that we have this deanery appointed post, this school's chaplain. I'm going to name it Debs. Thank you, Debs. We're really glad that Debs is our deanery school's chaplain. And as a deanery, we are funding that. And that's really something successful, something that we are championing at the moment. We're good at collaboration in churches together, particularly in the towns. And there is some rural connection with other denominations, such as the Methodists in the rural settings, but it is less so. And then there is good collaboration between our churches and community groups, for example, things like Whitchurch Hospital and the Air Cadets. But that isn't sort of meant to be an exhaustive list. It is meant to be, for example. But where are we wasting energy? That's another question that the diocese asked us to consider. Perhaps we're spending a huge amount of time managing multiple buildings with very small congregations. I mentioned that we've got 20 listed buildings. So clergy and church wardens spend a huge amount of time managing those buildings. We often have lots of PCC meetings because a vicar might have responsibility for 3, 4, 5 parishes potentially. And so there's a lot of bureaucracy and administration issues. Only one of our benefices has a paid administrator. Only one. There is repetition of services. So, for example, online, it might be that I'm offering evening prayer on a Monday and morning prayer on a Tuesday, and someone else is doing that too. So maybe there's an issue here. We're also offering multiple courses at the moment, but there's potential that we could have offered one if we'd done it online. But we have to recognize that people still value the local church. So you can't necessarily only do one if people don't want to travel. And we're not necessarily sharing our resources very well. So for example, we're doing collective worship in schools, but how much are we sharing what we do in collective? So there's lots of us who are producing videos for our schools at the moment, but actually we could have produced one video and shared it around all the schools potentially, or shared the same scripts that we could have all used. It's an example. What are some of the key challenges that are facing us as we look towards the future, as we think about where God is prompting us as a deanery? Obviously, COVID is going away, we hope and pray, but it has had such a huge effect on us that it will change the way that we do church when we go back. And we have to recognize that. That's actually perhaps something to be concerned about, but also something to see as a great opportunity. I heard someone say, don't be in a rush to go back to the church that you were when God is calling you to be the church that you've never been before. So there's potential there too. We're definitely not reaching the younger generations yet. That is a challenge. How do we reach them, particularly those after they've gone through primary schools? We're really good at getting them to them in our primary schools. How are we reaching them after that? We've still got a lot of loneliness in our deanery. Again, we talked about those rural settings. Potentially that's it, but there's also lots of other forms of loneliness too. We've got this contrast between our town context and our rural context. There are different ways of doing ministry and mission, and they don't always work when you translate them from one context to another. And within that also, there are varying interpretations, perhaps between contexts particularly, of what is and isn't a key issue. There are certain things that might fire you up in one church, but when you go to the neighbouring benefice, you might find it's not really considered such an important thing for them. We've got ageing congregations and we are struggling to share the good news. So there is a question of, why are we not drawing new people in? And is it because we don't know how to tell them about Jesus, for example? And then obviously, big challenge, finances. We have not enough money going around, and that is a diocesan problem and an individual benefice problem in most cases. So that's really the end of my presentation today. So phase 2 is, what is the vocation of this deanery? Or as I said, what is God prompting us towards? We would be very keen to hear your thoughts on what you've just watched. In particular, we would value your thoughts on the final question in the presentation. What is the vocation of this deanery going forwards? Or if you find that question a little tricky to get your head around, you might prefer to ask, what is God prompting us towards as a deanery? If you've got anything that you'd like to share, you can reach the Deanery Shaping for Mission team by emailing us at this address, sfm@shropshirechurches.uk. We look forward to hearing from you.